Pay attention to this map. The most common last names in each Hispanic American country are Hernandez, Gonzalez, Flores, Rodriguez, and Martinez. I don't know about you, but to me they don't sound much like Quechua or Nahuatl, but rather Spanish, our official and majority language. This could be interpreted as meaning that rather than being the result of colonization, we are the result of a mixture, and that the Spanish blood running through our veins is reflected in our first and last names. And why do we have these names? Well, because at various points in our history, Spanish people from the Iberian Peninsula came to the Americas to settle and stayed to become part of our countries. What were the biggest waves of Spanish immigration in Hispanic America? Are you interested? Alright then, stay until the end of the video. Although this man, whom many call a genocidal, arrived in 1492, the Castilian conquest of continental America only began during the 1510s. It's worth mentioning that the main conquistadors came, ironically, from one of the poorest and most forgotten regions of Spain, Extremadura. Here are some pictures from when I visited Trujillo, the hometown of Francisco Pizarro. Any resemblance to Cusco is not just a coincidence. After the fall of the Aztec Empire in present-day Mexico and the Inca Empire in present-day Peru, the first migrations of Spanish settlers to the New World began. 1 out of every 2 migrants was from Extremadura and Andalusia. The reason? Extremadura's status has hardly changed over time. Back then, it was already one of the poorest regions in Spain. A harsh land, not very fertile and without major cities, young people from Extremadura saw in America an opportunity for advancement that was impossible on the peninsula. As for Andalusia, let's remember that the first expeditions departed from Puerto de Palos in what is now the province of Huelva. So Andalusians really were at the doorstep of the gossip coming from the New World. Also in Seville was the Casa de Contratación de Indias, whose archives I also visited when I was in the Andalusian capital, which regulated travel and trade with America. That is, for an Andalusian, it was easier to plan their trip because imagine how much of a hassle it would be to be a Basque or a Galician and have to travel all the way to Seville just to risk whether you get to travel or not, right? Or am I wrong? Most Andalusians and Extremadurans were men, young, single, from humble backgrounds, looking for new opportunities. On the other hand, immigration from Castile and León, which was less massive, was mainly made up of religious people, bureaucrats, and hidalgos looking to make a fortune. The main destinations were Santo Domingo, Cuba, Puerto Rico, and above all, Mexico and Peru, the centers of the former empires. The amount? It is estimated that between 1,500 and 1,650, about 350,000 Spaniards emigrated to the New World, adapting and mixing with the local population. This is how Mestizaje began. Ironic? It's ironic that the Canary Islands were the first Spanish overseas territory, and also the one from which most Spaniards who settled there wanted to emigrate. And it's no wonder. Unproductive volcanic soils, overpopulation, and recurring crises led many Canary Islanders to reconsider their home. Moreover, the Canary Islands are literally the Atlantic gateway to America, where even Columbus made a couple of stops during his journey. In addition to this, the monarchy itself encouraged Canarian immigration because it considered the islanders loyal to the crown. The reason? They never led rebellions against Castile and did not have an identity separate from the Castilian one, unlike others. That is why, during the 17th and 18th centuries, royal decrees were issued encouraging Canarians to emigrate to America, promising them land and legal security. Land? I had to work 10 years just for the down payment on my first apartment. It is estimated that between the 17th and 19th centuries, more than 90,000 Canarians immigrated to America, with 50,000 of them arriving in Venezuela.
I'm Canarian and I speak like someone from Caracas, but you have to check that with someone who's truly from Caracas.
Because Anita doesn't say, I mean, seriously?
I can't believe it. I mean, no.
Any similarity between the Canarian and Venezuelan accents is not just a coincidence. Besides Venezuela, Canarians also emigrated to Cuba and Puerto Rico. The main economic activities they engaged in were agriculture, especially tobacco and sugar cane plantations, and cattle ranching in the Venezuelan plains. During this period, there was also emigration, though to a lesser extent, of Basques and Navarrese. Unlike the Canarians, these northern Spaniards did not come from rural backgrounds but were merchants, bureaucrats, or families with initial capital. Even from this time, the socioeconomic gap between the north and the south was significant. And where did Basques and Navarrese emigrate to? Mainly to New Spain, Mexico City, Puebla, and Havana, where they founded trading houses, guilds, and merchants' consulates. Even the average American knows that the Spanish-American Wars of Independence took place during the first decades of the 19th century. Or maybe not even that, you know? From here, a turning point was marked. Spaniards from the Iberian Peninsula no longer had such an easy time immigrating to America because they were no longer moving within their own country. And as the world turns, this coincides with a Spanish region becoming even poorer than Extremadura itself. Galicia. The community of Rosalía Castro was left even further behind during the Industrial Revolution, since it was very difficult to industrialize a region that was hard to access and poorly connected. Galicia was then trapped in an agrarian economy with medieval aspects. And what happens when you depend only on agriculture? You live in a demographic world where your population almost doubles in a century, and you experience a series of bad harvests and plagues. Well, that's when you start to starve, and when hunger gets tough, shame loosens. So the only way out was to emigrate. Between 1830 and 1936, 1.5 million Galicians left for Latin America. But why, if we are poor countries? That wasn't the case yet for Uruguay and Argentina, which, thanks to some cattle ranchers at the beginning of the century, had wealth comparable to that of many European countries. The Galician emigration to the Rio de la Plata was so massive that Galician became synonymous with Spanish. Look, man, here comes another Galician, but I'm Andalusian, damn it. In the same period, the Canarians carried out a new wave of migration. Between 1830 and 1930, about 60,000 Canarians emigrated to Venezuela. In Cuba, the numbers are similar, especially in the tobacco and sugarcane regions. Again, the driving force behind these migrations was the structural poverty on the islands and overpopulation. And Venezuela was still a very attractive destination for emigrating due to its stability and sustainable growth. Back in those days, of course, expropriated. In 1939, there was a complete turnaround in Spanish immigration. This new wave was no longer for economic reasons, but for ideological ones. So why was it then? Even the most illiterate person knows that the Spanish Civil War ended with the Francoist victory, which resulted in the persecution of the defeated Republicans. Besides the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, Mexico also backed the Second Spanish Republic. The reason? The then president Lázaro Cárdenas wanted to continue the legacy of the Mexican Revolution. Many of the social reforms of the Second Republic were his model to follow. In addition, his speeches always had an anti-fascist, anti-imperialist component and a defense of popular sovereignty. And what better way to show Uncle Sam that Mexico was a sovereign country than by proving it had its own voice in international politics? For that reason, after the Republican defeat, Mexico opened its doors to exiles persecuted by Francoism. Between 25,000 and 30,000 Spaniards arrived in Mexico, among them the Witch of 71. This time, not only did rural people with limited resources arrive, but also intellectuals, professionals, and engineers. In fact, Mexico City was considered the capital of the Spanish Republic in exile. It's important to highlight that although Mexico was the main destination, Spanish Republicans also arrived in Chile, the Dominican Republic, and Cuba. In short, when reviewing the waves of migration, we see that Hispanic America is not just the result of a conquest, but of centuries of mixing. Even though some people see the Spanish as colonizers, history tells us that the vast majority of them did not come with the intention of looting, but rather chasing a dream they couldn't achieve in their own land. And even though some try to break the bond, the truth is that Hispanics on both sides of the Atlantic are connected physically, historically, and culturally. Happy October 12th. Don't forget to leave your comment and subscribe to the channel. I'm adding my social media links in the description. And if you want to watch the new videos in the premiere and have more interaction with me, your donations on Patreon, Una Manito Net, or channel memberships are welcome. See you next time.